You're listening to the Wedding Biz Network, the voice of the creative entrepreneur.
Come on, y'all!
Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz. And before I mention today's interview, I want to say that last Monday was a conversation with David Tutera. I had done a full-length interview of David back in 2018 and wanted to see what he was up to, as well as how he's working through the pandemic. And David did not disappoint. It was a great interview as usual. And today's interview is in lieu of the next level, and it is a conversation with Carrie Goldberg, the travel and weddings director at Harper's Bazaar, where she oversees all things bridal, weddings, and travel for Bazaar.com, in charge of content strategy and visuals for Bazaar's digital travel and wedding verticals, and editor of Bazaar's membership subscription program called Bazaar Bride. So enjoy my conversation with Carrie Goldberg. Hey, Carrie, so good to have you on the Wedding Biz again. Hello.
Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I want to urge everyone listening that if you all have not heard my interview of Carrie the first time, it was episode 186, where I got her entire backstory and all of it, and that was really great. So, and I think, God, Carrie, I think it's been a while, like over a year since we did that interview.
That was a while ago. We were actually in not even the office I left with COVID-19. We were in my old office, so that's got to be...
Oh, that's right, that conference room or something.
Yeah, that's got to be over a year ago.
Yeah, that's wild. Well, you know, I know at this point, I mean, so we're all kind of getting tired of talking about COVID-19, but I'm sure people want to hear, what was that like for you, both personally and in business at Harper's Bazaar when this whole thing hit? I mean, what did you go through, you know, emotionally?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I kind of was introduced to the quarantine situation pretty early on. I covered London Fashion Week the second week of February. I then went to Lake Como for the weekend because anyone who knows me well knows that that is my happy place. I love it there. And I was visiting our mutual friend, Rachel Berthasol. And I was there for the weekend. And that was the weekend that COVID-19 was kind of discovered in Northern Italy. So when I got back to New York, my boss at the time just asked me kindly to work from home for 2 weeks. And then I was back at the office for probably 3 days before my floor was actually shut down because there was exposure of somebody's family member on the floor. So they shut my floor down to clean it. And then we never went back to the office. So I've actually been working from home since the last week of February.
Wow. How is that going? I mean, you live alone, I believe. How's that going for you?
I do. I live in a studio in Manhattan. And at the beginning, it was actually really hard. I had a couple of friends who got really sick with COVID, and I was kind of feeling really cooped up. I had a lot of shoots that were canceling, and my favorite part of my job is styling on set. And I hated that I was canceling shoot after shoot. I felt like I was sort of alone because a lot of people were still at work and I was working from home because I'd been in Europe. And then after that, and after my first 2 weeks of quarantine, I actually moved into a friend's pool house and I quarantined there for 2 weeks. Then I moved into my friend's guest house in Connecticut. So I really hopped around every 2 weeks as I felt safe to do so and where I could distance with a small group of people. And then I even moved to Florida for the month of May. I moved to West Palm Beach to kind of get some sun. I drove down with Chris Hesney of Hesney & Co. He's a phenomenal event designer. And we spent the month of May in Palm Beach. So I really did move around, but I kind of kept it in 2 week and month-long stints so that obviously I could be safe and make sure that I wasn't affecting anyone around me and I wasn't affecting my family. And then I started seeing my family again in mid-June. So that was a long time to go without seeing my family, especially because we live really close to each other. My grandparents are like 10 blocks away from me.
Oh, God. Yeah, I could really resonate with that. I have a brother who lives in New Jersey, and he and I, my mother's in Tampa, Florida. We haven't seen her in forever. And so we're both going to quarantine she's a lot older. We want to be careful. So we're going to quarantine for 2 weeks. Then we're going to drive down together all the way down to Tampa and stay there for like a week. It's like, it just makes, the relationship was already so meaningful and with my brother, but it's like everything is it's heightened, it's even more profound, relationships, isn't it? It really feels that way.
Totally. And I think especially for anyone that has elderly family members, I mean, the one thing that like I sort of feel like this is a great equalizer. We're sort of all in this together. Obviously, there are some people in our world that are infinitely more affected by this than others, like the elderly and people in low income communities. And I think that I consider myself incredibly lucky. But at the same time, I do in my darkest moments feel like this pandemic is like robbing me of valuable time with my grandparents because, you know, obviously when you have 90-year-old family members that you love, it's every single day with them is like a gift. So there's a little bit of that. But my grandfather has the insane zest for life. He's taken to having distanced block parties in front of their apartment building where he pour glasses of wine for complete strangers and ask them how their day was. So it's been a fun way to kind of entertain outside the box for us.
Well, what kind of communications are you getting from couples and from planners about this, especially lately? What are you hearing? You know, what's going on out there?
I mean, they're very different, the communications that I'm getting from couples versus planners. I mean, I speak to some brides that are incredibly eager to get started. People that have been planning 2021 weddings all along that sort of feel like this is their chance to get ahead of the game. Couples that have postponed that feel really defeated and just can't decide if they just want to be married and do it simply, or if they really want to wait to go all out, or if they want to do a civil ceremony this year and then simply postpone even as far as 2022 to have like an epic anniversary party after they've started a family. There's a lot of kind of mixed vibes, and it really is based on the personality of the bride and of the couple. You know, like what are their priorities? If their priorities are, we want to get married quickly because we want to start a family, those are the couples that are going to have intimate micro weddings so that they can really start a life together. If we're talking about people that have been together for years and they don't really, and they live together, they almost feel married already. Those couples don't really feel like they're in such a rush. They're just like, well, we want the wedding we want and we'll have it when we have it. As far as planners, I mean, I think that I speak to quite a few planners every day, and everyone kind of has their own way of dealing with this. Some people are starting micro wedding businesses. Some people are really still catering to their luxury clients as they would, but constantly moving things around. It's sort of like a constant game of chess. And some planners are dealing with clients who unfortunately don't take this pandemic as seriously as they might like. And they're trying to manage the expectations of a client who still wants to get married this fall and make sure that it's safe for everyone working and make sure that the client understands that, yes, their vendors might have to be in masks, even though they don't want to wear one. Yes, there's going to have to be a COVID-19 safety plan. It's those hard conversations that tend to not come up when you're dealing in the business of happy.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting you say that. So, I mean, you know, I've got Kushner Entertainment with, you know, music and entertainment, and we actually have a good handful of weddings that are taking place like now, you know, this Saturday, the following Saturday, we have a few in September. I'm like shocked that we have any at all. I mean, of course, like everyone else, most of our business has been moved a couple times now, but the ones that are occurring now, there's one, Carrie, in particular that's coming up in which it's in mid-September, and they cut down the guest list from like 290 to 90, but still it's 90 people. It's going to be, granted, they've moved it to an outside tent, but still it's so crowded. Because we came up with what we're calling like a COVID-19 rider. We just had to, in order to talk about protecting the safety, not just of the band, but also of the guests. I mean, like my Top Band Sound Connection, we have four singers. And so we're saying, you know, we think you should be a certain amount of feet away from the band. You know, maybe we don't want to have ropes, but maybe with floral design, we can, you know, make a space. And the planner, who means well, you know, and is really struggling herself with this, came back to me and said, we can only do 6 feet. And I'm like, again, I got 4 singers. It's just, it blows my mind. At the same time, we want to support these couples, but it's a real challenge. It's a big challenge.
It is a big challenge. I mean, I think that it also begins to come down to, again, to me, it's just a matter of level setting and managing priorities. And unfortunately, per usual, the planner, I mean, Brooke Keegan, who's a dear friend of mine, always jokes, like, it's always the planner's fault. It's always the planner's responsibility.
Right.
Like, because at the end of the day, it really is the planner's job to have those hard conversations and also to manage expectations both on your end and of the client. And I was speaking to so many people just about, we just aren't trained to have contracts that are bulletproof for a moment where one side of the contract believes that everything is business as usual, and one side of the contract believes that a force majeure should be in place. Like there's usually a force majeure clause is kind of mutually understood. Like there was an earthquake here, the wedding can't happen. This goes into effect. It's not really the case right now. It's really unique. And I think that it really needs to be handled delicately and on a case by case basis. And luckily, this is kind of the boot camp that the best planners in the business can really shine in. I mean, that it's a skill set that is super unique to be able to navigate managing expectations and keeping everybody safe while still keeping everyone happy and still having the environment feel beautiful and festive.
Do you wish you could be a fly on the wall listening to music industry pros like Clive Davis, Jerry Moss, and Edwin McCain? Well, check out my other podcast, The Music Makers, where you can hear great stories from some of the biggest music industry professionals around. You can find it on your cell phone's podcast app or at themusicmakers.com. Again, that's The Music Makers. How has the pandemic affected styling?
I mean, I think that it's a little bit more fun, just that there's more looks, but I think that the pandemic has definitely made styling an essential business. At the beginning, it was sort of, does a bride hire a stylist or doesn't a bride hire a stylist? Now I think the question is, what stylist does a bride want to work with? I think that getting into a store that is potentially closed, finding samples from employees who are potentially furloughed, getting a sense of when new collections are coming out, those are all things that require relationships and insider knowledge. And I think stylists kind of are on the front lines of that intel. So I think that brides that are really planning multi-day celebrations that require multiple dresses and impeccable tailoring at the early part of 2021 are really looking at stylists as a key member of their team. In terms of actually styling, like choosing dresses, I mean, I think that being able to think of a ceremony this year, a more intimate ceremony, as sort of one look, whether that's a shorter dress or a less dramatic style, and then planning something that's a little bit more over the top for next year or the following, is a really exciting way to think about dressing. Because typically, most brides are just doing ceremony gown, potential reception dress or after party dress, and maybe a rehearsal dinner outfit or potentially a brunch. Now we're talking about 1 to 2 dresses this year that you never thought you needed, plus an additional few dresses for next year. And with a lot of brides, it's about figuring out how to use the dresses that they currently have for this year, tailoring them differently, maybe cutting them down to being something that's a little bit more appropriate for a smaller wedding or a cocktail party with just their family and best friends, rather than, a show-stopping ball gown. But I think that brides are also getting a sense of what I keep saying the word priorities in this interview, but what their priorities are. Like, is feeling like you more important and having the wedding that you want with the person that you love the most important thing? Spoiler alert, the answer is yes.
Right.
Or is wearing what your mom wants you to wear most important? Or having the wedding that your parents wanted to throw you most important? And I think that a lot of people are reprioritizing what their wedding weekends were supposed to look like. People are having more themed parties. People are more inclined to take fashion risks because this pandemic pause has made them realize who they are, what's important to them, what they want, what makes them feel beautiful. And when you're sitting at home in sweatpants, you're really thinking about the moments that you felt the best about yourself. And that's what you should be taking into shopping and styling a wedding.
I'm wondering, these are great points. And it makes me think that post-COVID, I wonder how fashion, like with gowns and concept of styling, I wonder if it's going to just snap back to what it was before, or if we're going to see some permanent, enduring changes as a result of this.
I mean, I do think we're going to see permanent, enduring changes as a result of this. I also think that, in 2019, especially maybe 2018, and I would almost want to ask people like Mark Ingram what their thoughts are on this, but brides were like visiting stores maybe 6+ times. It was exhausting. Brides were trying on 80+ dresses before they narrowed down the one that they would choose. And that to me is just a result of being indecisive, bad editing, kind of wanting to play dress up without wanting to pull trigger on a purchase, which is, I totally understand because you're ideally only going to do that once. But this pandemic has really created a situation where you're lucky if you can go into a store once.
Right.
So I think that decision making in wedding planning, especially when it comes to fashion, is going to become much more the norm. And I think people that do gut checks and know their personal style and make fast decisions are going to win the day when it comes to getting the best out of a brand or the best out of an alterations process. Because kind of wavering and wanting to revisit dresses over and over again and not being able to make a decision just doesn't fly when stores are opening just to have a one-on-one appointment for you that requires a temperature check and, a potential promise that you haven't been exposed to the virus.
Yeah. I'm wondering too, if beyond styling, beyond, bridal gown business, I'm wondering if there are any trends, that are starting to manifest or that will continue once we're through this. Because it does seem, in my own words, similar to what you're saying, being grounded is different. The whole sense of what is really important to us, and I think we're in a sense coming back to basics. And I'm wondering how that might affect the wedding business in other ways.
Well, and we actually spoke about this in my very first interview with you, but I think now, I thought that luxury was being redefined in 2019. Luxury is 100% being redefined in 2020. I think the notion of being fancy and over the top has never felt more frivolous. I think if it's not authentic to who you are as a person, it will look dated after this year. I think that if you aren't somebody that's always gone all out with how you entertain and how you dress, to do it for your wedding kind of feels too extra.
Yeah.
And I think that relationships and family and just our value system has changed. And I don't think that I hope it doesn't change, because I think it really gets to the heart of what weddings are all about. And I don't think that means that weddings won't be dreamy and won't be aspirational and won't be over the top. I just think that all of those decisions are going to be more about what's true to the couple and what's experiential for the guest, and making sure that guests who have been sitting at home for a very long time now have a chance to really kick back and party, rather than, an over the top dinner with endless toasts that just sort of feels like a performance for the couple and their family.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, before we go, are there any tips and advice beyond what you've already spoken about for couples and or wedding industry professionals? Because you've got this macro view from what you do.
I think that my only advice, which I would have given this advice before the pandemic, is kind of not being afraid to have those candid, honest conversations. The planners that I see navigating this the most beautifully are the ones that are super honest, yet obviously eloquent and polite with their clients. They really manage expectations and are not afraid to have the tough conversations, so that when it comes down to the last minute, everyone's aligned and all the vendors feel like a team. I think in regard to styling and in regard to shopping, at this point, ask for what you want. If you want to customize a dress, if you want a dress to be done in a color, if you like the top of one dress and the bottom of another dress, brands are looking to sell dresses right now. I mean, the fashion industry is in a really, really tough place right now. And so I think that it never hurts to ask questions that you thought you would have otherwise gotten a no to in the past. And I kind of have an equal part of advice of shop your closet and be sustainable when need be, when you're looking to save rather than, purchasing fast fashion. But I don't know. I just really encourage people to think about the brands that they support when they're shopping for their weddings, and to consider the people behind those brands and what they stand for. Because I think that now more than ever, we're learning that some of our favorite brands maybe aren't spending the money that they make from us in the best places. And it's really on you when you make a purchase decision to understand not only what you're getting in your closet and make sure that you're happy with it, but also know where your money's going.
Oh, I agree. I think that's so important. So where else are you going to go, Carrie, for as you spend your time? Because like you say, you've been moving around. You have any thoughts about where you're going to go next? You're just going to stay in Manhattan?
Yeah. So I'm in Manhattan for the next couple weeks. I'm going to Nantucket for the weekend before Labor Day.
Nice. Okay.
And I am just crossing my fingers for when I can get back to Lake Como. I check the travel ban news every day.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Rachel Perthistle, she's been on the show too, so I know her pretty well. And she has this invitation for me to come to Como and to, check out all these villas and, the whole thing, and maybe have a little special series on the show. And I'm dying because it got stopped when this pandemic hit. And Italy is my favorite place to go. I know. I want to see you sometime in Como.
100%. We should do this in Como the next time we chat.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Well, look, thanks again so much for being on this show, Carrie. I really appreciate it. I always enjoy having you on.
Likewise. Thank you again for having me. It was really fun.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Carrie Goldberg. Be sure to check out the website at harpersbazaar.com/wedding. Again, harpersbazaar.com/wedding. You can find all of the social media handles for Carrie and Harper's Bazaar in the show notes at theweddingbiz.com. And then next week on Monday, I'm going to be featuring an interview with destination planner Joanne Grigoli. So be sure to tune in Monday. We'll catch you next week on The Wedding Biz.